On a bright morning in 2025, inside a workshop in Zhejiang County, a man in a blue cap stood over a tray lined with black foam. Resting in the middle was a rough diamond weighing 156.47 carats, cloudy at first glance, but alive under the light. Around him, polishing machines buzzed, phones came out, and someone leaned closer just to make sure the number on the scale was real. It looked like a small local celebration. A worker, a stone, a room full of people staring at something shiny. But what if that moment in a county most of the world had never heard of was really a warning shot aimed at one of the oldest luxury businesses on Earth? Here is the number that changes the whole scene. According to media reports, Zhejiang alone was expected to produce 12 million carats of lab-grown diamonds in 2025, around 60% of China's total output. And China's total production capacity was reported to be about 70% of the global total. That is not a side business. That is not a niche. That is the kind of number that can bend prices, scare old brands, and force an entire industry to stop pretending the future is still far away. Because diamonds were never sold by sparkle alone. They were sold by story. The story said diamonds were rare. The story said they were made by nature, deep underground, over huge stretches of time no human could ever control. The story said that if something took the earth millions of years to make, then, of course, it should cost a fortune to own. That story built empires. It built mines in faraway places. It built giant trading networks. It built whole neighborhoods around cutting and polishing. It built jewelry counters where a tiny stone could carry the emotional weight of marriage, family, money, and status all at once. And most of all, it built a powerful feeling that diamonds belonged to a world of scarcity. Then factories got involved. Not fake gem factories, not glass, not imitation. Real diamonds. Carbon arranged in the same crystal form with physical and chemical properties that match natural diamonds so closely that the difference is not what the stone is, but where it grew and how long it took. That one change sounds small at first. It is not, because the moment you can grow something rare in large numbers, it stops behaving like it used to. A natural diamond comes with the old logic of geology. It is limited by what exists in the ground, what can be mined, what can be moved, and what can be sorted. A factory-grown diamond follows a different logic. It is limited by machine time, power, process control, and how fast a company can expand. That shifts the whole fight. The old diamond world is built around owning access to scarcity. The new diamond world is built around mastering production. One depends on what nature already made. The other depends on what engineers can repeat, improve, and scale. Once the industry moves from mine logic to factory logic, the center of power can move too. That is exactly what happened in central China. To see why, you have to go back before the jewelry boom, before social media ads for cheap engagement rings, before celebrities wore lab-grown stones at red carpet events. The Chinese diamond story did not begin with romance. It began with tools. In the 1950s, China was trying to build up its manufacturing base. In Zhengzhou, the capital of Henan province, a factory for abrasive tools was set up. Abrasive tools are tools that cut, grind, smooth, or drill hard materials. Think of them like the rough side of sandpaper, but taken to an industrial scale and made strong enough to bite into stone, metal, and other tough surfaces. Those tools needed industrial diamonds. At the time, many of those diamonds had to be imported. That created a problem. If a country wants to industrialize quickly, depending on imported ultra-hard materials, it is expensive, slow, and risky. So the challenge was not only how to buy diamonds, it was how to make them. That pushed Chinese researchers toward a question scientists around the world had chased for decades. Could people recreate the same conditions that formed natural diamonds deep inside the earth? Could human beings build a machine that does, in a controlled box, what the planet once did in darkness under crushing pressure? By 1963, China had created its first lab-grown diamond at a research institution in Beijing. Then, in 1965, Henan built the country's first six-anvil press, a machine designed to create the high-pressure environment needed for this work. Those dates matter because they show how early the roots of this industry really go. It was never some sudden internet age trend. Henan kept building its position in ultra-hard materials over the next decades. That phrase, ultra-hard materials, sounds stiff and technical, but the meaning is simple. These are materials so tough they can cut or shape other tough materials. They matter in factories, in construction, in toolmaking, and in all the quiet places where modern industry gets its strength. Then the story narrowed to one person and one place. In the 1980s, an engineer named Feng Jinzhang returned to his hometown, Zhejiang, in eastern Henan. He had worked on lab-grown diamond research in Zhengzhou. Back home, he opened the Shaoyuan Diamond Factory, the first local lab-grown diamond factory in that county. That move turned out to be bigger than almost anyone could have guessed at the time, because Feng did not just open a factory, he planted a local skill base. His factory trained technicians. Those technicians later started their own businesses. Some began as small family workshops, others grew larger. Over time, a network formed. Knowledge spread from person to person, not just from machine to machine. That is how clusters are born. One workplace becomes many, one team becomes a local industry. And Zhejiang was ready for a new identity. This was not a place famous to the outside world. It was known more for chili peppers and beef cattle than for advanced materials. Even today, its population is just over 600,000, small by Chinese standards. Yet this county gradually became known as the diamond capital of China. That kind of transformation tells you something important. A global industry does not always shift because of a giant capital city or a famous brand. Sometimes it shifts because one overlooked place gets very good at one very hard thing, then keeps getting better while the rest of the world is not paying close attention. That is what diamond production in Zhejiang started to look like. By the late 1980s, diamond processing enterprises had spread across the county. The local workforce knew the machines. The local firms knew the supply chain. The local factories learned how to make diamonds faster and cheaper. And because they were in the same place, they could teach each other, compete with each other, and scale faster than outsiders expected. This is where the story stops being local. A single factory can be interesting. A factory cluster can be dangerous to an old business model. Once a county becomes a place where machines, workers, polishing shops, equipment makers, and buyers all gather together, the cost of making more product drops. Speed rises, skill rises, competition rises. The product stops acting rare, even if the old brand story still says it is. And that is where the diamond industry began to feel pressure. Now we should slow down for a second and talk about how these diamonds are actually made, because this is the heart of the whole change. There are two main methods. One is called HPHT, which stands for high pressure, high temperature. The other is called CVD, which stands for chemical vapor deposition. Those names sound like textbook words, but the basic idea is easy to picture. Start with HPHT. This is the method most common among Chinese producers. GIA, one of the best-known gem organizations in the world, says this method uses equipment that mimics the high pressure and high temperature conditions under which natural diamonds form in the earth. That still sounds abstract, so imagine it this way. Picture a pressure cooker, a forge, and a seed all working together. The seed is a tiny diamond crystal, like the first ice crystal that helps a frozen pattern spread across a cold window. Around that seed sits carbon material. Then the machine creates a world of extreme heat and crushing pressure, the kind of environment that tells carbon atoms to stop being loose and start locking into the hard, ordered structure we call diamond. The crystal grows bit by bit. It does not explode into existence in one dramatic flash. It builds. Carbon settles. The structure forms around the seed. Layer after layer, the stone gets larger. Nature does this over enormous spans of time deep underground. The factory does it in a chamber where every condition is controlled by people and machines. That is the key difference. Time and control. CVD works in a different way. Instead of using extreme pressure, it puts a flat diamond seed inside a vacuum chamber filled with carbon-containing gas. Energy, often from a microwave source, breaks apart the gas. The carbon atoms separate and then settle onto the seed, slowly building new layers of diamond. If HPHT feels like forcing rock to form under a mountain, CVD feels more like growing frost in a carefully designed room. Both methods create lab-grown diamonds. Both produce stones whose properties correspond very closely to natural diamonds, but they come with different costs, different speed, and different strengths. Reports on China's industry say Chinese producers mainly use HPHT because it is cheaper and faster, while Indian producers have often favored CVD, which can produce higher purity stones but tends to cost more and take longer. That matters because the business was never only about making diamonds. It was about making them cheaply enough, quickly enough, and at high enough volume to change the market. China's strength was not just that it could grow diamonds, it was that its producers learned how to do it at scale. Think of it like farming in a greenhouse. A wild forest depends on land, weather, and time. A greenhouse depends on process. Once you know the right temperature, the right light, the right timing, and the right inputs, you can repeat the result again and again. You can train workers. You can standardize steps. You can lower costs. You can expand output. That is the factory advantage in one simple picture. Mines are tied to geography. Factories are tied to method. And in modern industry, method usually spreads faster than geology. If one region masters the method, it can move much faster than a mine ever could. That is why the rise of Zhejiang is not just a story about diamonds. It is a story about what happens when a luxury good gets pulled into the logic of manufacturing. Luxury goods do not always survive that unchanged. At first, many people in the traditional diamond world thought they would. They argued that lab-grown diamonds might look the same, but they would never carry the same emotional weight. A natural diamond had history. It had rarity. It had that old deep earth romance. A lab-grown stone, no matter how pretty, would always feel less special. That argument worked for a while, but then the numbers began to change faster than the feelings. Reports cited by industry consultant Paul Zimnisky showed that the price of lab-grown diamonds dropped to roughly a quarter of what it had been in 2015. In China, media reports said a 1-carat lab-grown diamond was commonly sold online for just 1,000 to 2,000 RMB. In some cases, the 18K gold ring setting cost more than the diamond in the ring. That is a wild sentence, and it is worth sitting with it. For decades, the diamond was the expensive center of the whole product. The ring was the holder. The diamond was the thing that justified the price. But when the ring setting costs more than the stone it carries, the emotional and financial balance flips. The symbol is still there, but the old price logic starts to fall apart. And once buyers notice that, the market gets shaky. Because then the question changes from, is this a real diamond, to, why am I paying so much more for the other one? That is a much harder question for the old industry to answer. If both stones sparkle, both can be certified, and both are real diamonds in material terms, then the old business has to lean much harder on story, prestige, and origin. Some buyers care deeply about that, some do not. That is why the rise of factory-grown diamond is so unsettling. It does not erase the old meaning of diamonds for everyone. It splits the audience. One group still wants rarity and natural origin. Another group wants size, clarity, and lower price. Once the market splits, the old industry loses the comfort of being the only game in town. And in that split, China's scale became a huge force. Local officials in Henan have claimed that China accounts for about half of the world's lab-grown diamond output, and that around 80% of China's production comes from Henan. Another report said China's lab-grown diamond production capacity is about 70% of the global total. Either way, the broad picture is the same. A giant share of the world's new diamonds is tied to one country, and much of that is tied to one province. Then there is Zhejiang itself. Media reports said the county's output was expected to hit 12 million carats in 2025, or around 60% of China's total. Let that sink in. A county many people outside China have never heard of became one of the most important places in the world for a product, once treated like the ultimate symbol of geological rarity. That sounds almost too strange to be true, and yet the visual proof is already there. Workers in Zhejiang polishing rough, lab-grown stones. A world record 156.47 carat rough diamond grown by a local enterprise in 2025. Online jewelry markets offering 1-carat stones at prices that would have seemed impossible not long ago. That is how disruption looks in the real world. Not as one dramatic headline and then a clean victory. It shows up as 100 small changes at once. A cheaper engagement ring, a nervous retailer, a factory cluster growing in a rural county, a luxury brand changing its wording, a buyer hesitating at the counter, an investor noticing falling margins, a worker polishing a stone that never touched the earth below a mine. Piece by piece, the old picture blurs. And this shift did not happen in a calm market. It came during a messy period for diamonds in general. During the pandemic, online luxury sales surged, pushing diamond prices higher by early 2022. But in March 2022, the U.S. Federal Reserve began raising interest rates, and other central banks followed. Consumers became more cautious. Spending on non-essential goods, including diamonds, started to soften. That would have been enough trouble on its own. But lab-grown diamond kept moving in the opposite direction. Demand continued to grow, even as prices fell. That sounds good for consumers, but it created a new problem for producers. More companies entered the field, more factories ramped up, more stones hit the market, supply began to outrun demand, and oversupply is brutal. When too many companies can make the same product, prices fall hard. Margins shrink. Inventory piles up. Yesterday's breakthrough becomes today's commodity. A product that once felt special starts to behave like a standard manufactured item. That is exactly the fear hanging over the lab-grown diamond business now. Even the companies driving the shift felt the pain. Sixth Tone reported that Chinese industry players like North Industries, Group Red Arrow, Henan Huanghe Whirlwind, and Henan Province Liliang Diamond all saw significant year-on-year declines in revenue and net profit in 2023. So this is not a fairy tale where Chinese factories crush the old market and then collect easy money forever. The truth is harsher than that. Scaling up quickly can give you power. It can also destroy your pricing. The same flood of supply that hurts your competitor can hurt you too. If the world suddenly has far more lab-grown stones than it can absorb, then everyone in the chain starts feeling pressure, from factory owners to retailers. That is why some companies are already looking for a second act. And this is where the story becomes even more interesting. Because diamonds are not only jewelry. For a long time, industrial diamonds were actually the larger practical story. Diamonds are extremely hard, which makes them useful for cutting and drilling. But that is not all. Diamond also moves heat very well. That sounds simple, but it matters a lot in advanced technology. If a machine part gets too hot, performance drops and parts can fail. A material that carries heat away quickly is valuable. Think of it like a super fast road for heat to escape a crowded city. In electronics, especially high power systems, that can be a big advantage. This is why some Chinese firms are talking beyond rings and necklaces. Henan Huanghe Whirlwind, for example, said it wanted to grow more diamonds for semiconductors, solar, and other emerging industries. The company also highlighted possible uses in microwave communication, infrared detection, radar covers, and quantum computing. Those are highly technical fields, but the core idea is simple enough. A diamond can be a symbol of love. It can also be a useful material inside serious machines. That may end up being the deeper long-term shift. If lab-grown diamonds were only about cheaper jewelry, the impact on the luxury business would already be huge. But if the same crystal-growing knowledge feeds into chips, sensors, heat management, and advanced industrial systems, then the industry stops being mainly about romance and starts becoming part of a much larger technology story. That would change who the winners are. In a jewelry market, the winners are often brands, designers, and retailers with emotional power. In an advanced materials market, the winners are often companies with better process control, better consistency, better crystal quality, and better integration with industrial supply chains. That is a very different contest, and China is comfortable in that kind of contest. We have seen versions of this pattern before: solar panels, batteries, electric vehicles. A product begins as expensive and somewhat limited. Chinese firms push scale hard. Prices drop. The global market shifts. Competitors complain about overcapacity. Then the technology spreads so widely that the old price structure never fully comes back. The diamond industry may be facing a similar pattern now. Still, if we want to be fair, we have to stop and hear the strongest skeptic's case. Because there is one, and it is not silly. A skeptic would say this entire boom proves why lab-grown diamonds can never replace natural diamonds at the high end. Their argument is not that lab-grown diamonds are fake. Their argument is that they're too easy to make once the process matures, and that means they can become cheap very fast. Think about a young couple shopping for a ring. One option is a natural diamond that fits the old story but stretches the budget. The other is a lab-grown stone that looks bigger, looks cleaner, and costs far less. Not every couple will make the same choice, but enough people making the cheaper choice can change a whole market. That is exactly what factories are counting on. And not only factories. Retailers, grading labs, online sellers, and equipment makers all have a stake in this new normal. Once a new supply chain reaches scale, a lot of people begin depending on it. They build businesses around it. They market it. They normalize it. They improve the consumer experience around it. That makes the shift harder to reverse. The natural diamond side knows this. That is one reason why the language around natural diamonds has become more defensive and more emotional. The pitch now leans harder on uniqueness, deep time, and provenance. It has to. When material difference is no longer an easy argument, the market moves toward narrative difference instead. So the fight becomes story versus system. The natural diamond industry says the story matters. The factory side says the system matters. One offers rarity, origin, and symbolism. The other offers access, scale, and lower price. And the uncomfortable truth is that both sides are right for different buyers. That is why the future will likely not be one clean winner. More likely, the diamond market keeps splitting into layers. Natural diamonds remain strong in the highest status segment, especially where rarity and origin are part of the value. Lab-grown diamonds keep taking share in the value-driven jewelry segment, where buyers want the look and the material without the old price. Industrial and high-tech diamond uses keep growing in the background, quietly becoming more important than most people realize. That last part may be the biggest surprise of all. Because the most important diamonds of the future may not be the ones sitting under jewelry store lights. They may be the ones buried inside machines, helping with heat control, sensing, communication, or advanced electronics. If that happens, then the biggest legacy of China's factory boom will not just be cheaper rings. It will be turning diamond into a modern industrial platform. And the places best positioned for that future will not necessarily be the places with the oldest luxury brands. They may be the places with the best presses, the best crystal growth, the best yield, the best worker training, and the deepest manufacturing culture. On that map, Henan matters. Zhejiang matters. The quiet factory floor matters. That is why the opening scene is bigger than it first looks. A worker holding a 156.47 carat rough stone is not only showing off a record, he is showing what decades of local industrial buildup can produce. He is showing what happens when a county learns to grow a crystal that once belonged to the mythology of Earth itself. He is showing why one luxury product now behaves like a manufacturing story, and that story is still unfolding. Maybe the biggest mistake would be to think this is only about price. It is not. Price is the sharpest signal, but the deeper shift is cultural. A diamond used to mean one thing. Now it can mean several things at once. It can mean natural rarity. It can mean engineered access. It can mean a status symbol. It can mean a practical material. It can mean forever. It can mean scale. That is a strange place for one stone to end up. But maybe it was always heading here. After all, a diamond has always been two things at once. It is a technical object and an emotional object. It is a crystal and a promise. The old market leaned heavily on the promise. The new market is forcing everyone to remember the crystal. And once you remember the crystal, the engineer enters the conversation. That is what China's factories really did. They pulled diamonds out of pure myth and back into process. They asked a hard industrial question. If this is a crystal, and if crystals can be grown, and if growth can be controlled, then why should this material remain trapped inside the logic of scarcity forever? That question cannot be unheard. The old diamond business can answer it in different ways. It can say, rarity still matters. It can say natural origin still carries emotional power. It can say some things should remain expensive because they are tied to time, earth, and tradition. Those are not weak arguments. In fact, for many buyers, they will remain convincing, but they are no longer the only arguments in the room. The factory now has its own argument, and it is brutally simple. The stone is real, the price is lower, the supply is growing, the technology is improving, and the same knowledge that grows jewelry stones may also feed future industries far larger than jewelry. That is not hype, that is structure. And structure is hard to fight. Once enough machines, workers, suppliers, and buyers line up around a new way of making something, the burden of proof flips. The new method no longer has to prove it belongs. The old method has to prove why it should keep dominating. That is where diamonds seem to be now. Not at the end of the old world, not at the total victory of the new one, but in an unstable middle where both stories still exist and neither can fully erase the other. That is why the industry feels tense. The market is not settled. The symbols are moving faster than people's feelings about them. And when symbols move, whole businesses shake. So if you zoom out from that one room in Zhejiang, the full picture comes into focus. You see the 1950s tool factory in Zhengzhou. You see the 1963 breakthrough in Beijing. You see the 1965 six-anvil press in Henan. You see Feng Jinjiang returning home in the 1980s. You see family workshops turning into a county-wide cluster. You see 12 million carats. You see cheap 1 carat stones online. You see De Beers backing away from lab-grown jewelry. You see companies aiming at semiconductors and solar. All of it connects. A county grows diamonds. Prices fall. Retailers feel pain. Old brand stories weaken. New industrial uses appear. The meaning of diamond stretches. What looked like a small manufacturing success becomes a pressure wave, moving through luxury, technology, and culture at the same time. That is why this story matters so much. Hence, somewhere around the middle of all this, it becomes personal. If you were handed 2 stones tomorrow, both real diamonds, both bright under the light, one tied to the old Earth story and one tied to a factory in Henan, which one would feel more valuable to you? You do not need to answer that yet. Just sit with it for a moment. Because markets are built from millions of private answers to questions like that. And the answers are already changing. Quietly in stores, quietly online, quietly in counties like Zhejiang, where workers keep polishing stones that did not exist a few weeks earlier. Quietly in boardrooms where executives study price charts and wonder whether the old business can still hold its shape. Quietly, but not for long. The longer this continues, the more likely the diamond industry ends up looking less like a world of scarcity and more like a world of layers. Natural stones at the top end, lab-grown stones across mass jewelry, industrial diamonds spreading into advanced applications. Factories and technology taking a larger share of the value than old mining prestige once did. That future is not guaranteed, but it is easy to see. And if it arrives, people may one day look back at Zhejiang the way they look back at other industrial turning points. Not as a side note, but as one of the places where the global market quietly changed shape before everyone else admitted it. Which brings us back to that workshop in 2025. The room is still bright. The stone is still sitting on dark foam. A worker leans over it, careful, proud, maybe a little stunned by the size of what his factory helped grow. Outside, the county goes on with its day. Most of the world is not watching. Most of the world does not yet feel how much has already shifted. But the shift is there all the same. A stone once used to sell the idea of timeless rarity is now coming out of machines by the millions. A county once known for farm products now helps shape the future of one of the world's most famous luxury goods. A material once locked inside romance is moving into the language of heat, chips, sensors, and industrial strategy. That is not a small change. That is a redefinition. And the most striking part is how ordinary the room looks. No giant mine, no heroic excavation, no ancient cave. Just machines, workers, lights, and process. That ordinary look may be the most powerful image of all, because it shows exactly what the old industry fears most. Not imitation, normalization. If this shift keeps going, the real threat to the natural diamond business is not that people will think lab-grown diamonds are magical. It is that people will think they are normal. Normal to buy, normal to wear, normal to gift, normal to build industries around, normal to use inside advanced machines. Once that happens, the old story has to work much harder to keep its premium. And maybe that is the biggest change forever really means here. Not that natural diamonds vanish, not that every buyer switches overnight, but that the diamond loses its single identity. It stops being just one kind of object in the human mind. It becomes several things at once, and once that happens, the market can never fully go back to how it was. A factory in central China helped do that. If you like these long, careful dives into the systems behind China's biggest industrial shifts, subscribing really does help me keep making them. Now I want to hear your hardest answer to this. If a factory can grow a real diamond in weeks and sell it for a fraction of the old price, is the natural diamond still winning on meaning? Or is it just surviving on an old story people are slowly outgrowing?